Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. A shooting at a Dallas area high school. 4 victims were injured, with 1 in critical condition, and police have the suspect in custody. As illegal immigrants continue to come into the country in record numbers, lawmakers are calling on the Biden administration to help secure the border. Senators met in D.C. and governors met at the southern border today to discuss potential solutions. Hundreds of thousands of COVID-19 test kits recalled. Americans alerted their positive results might have been wrong if they used this kit. The federal student loan forgiveness program is getting a major overhaul. The Department of Education says these changes could help thousands of people working in government and nonprofit sectors. And the Arizona Attorney General accuses the Biden administration of trying to intimidate parents and advance critical race theory. We hear from a former school board member and a co-founder of Parents Group to get her take. Police have arrested a suspect in connection with a school board shooting near Dallas, Texas. 4 victims were injured after an active shooter opened fire at a high school there. NTD's Kevin Hogan has more from the Arlington police.
The shooting occurred around 9 a.m. at Timberview High School in Arlington, Texas on Wednesday. This led to a lockdown and police securing the building. Then students were taken off the campus on buses. Police said at least 2 of the 4 victims suffered gunshot wounds and 1 is still in critical condition. The assistant chief of Arlington Police said they had 2 Mansfield Independent School District police officers at the school, and they responded to the scene immediately.
But again, I just want to reemphasize that this is not a random act of violence. This is not somebody attacking our schools. This is a student. We believe right now, preliminary, that it was a student that got into a fight and drew a weapon.
Unverified footage circulating on social media shows the moment the gun fired and students scrambling to find safety. And another video shows the fight that allegedly led up to the shooting. Police arrested the suspect without incident. 18-year-old Timothy George Simpkins will be charged with aggravated assault with a gun. The assistant chief says 3 of the victims are okay and 1 is already out of surgery.
We need to make sure that we keep him in thoughts and prayers, the families. We have an adult male who is not in surgery but is in good condition. And then we have a female that was also maybe grazed by a bullet or injured in some way.
Another victim is a 25-year-old male employee of the school who is also in good condition. There are nearly 1,900 students and teachers at the school, and its student body is 87% minority, with just over half of the students economically disadvantaged. Texas officials are reacting to the shooting, some of them praying for the victims, including State Representative Chris Turner, Senator Ted Cruz, and Governor Greg Abbott.
And that is, we grieve for everyone who's been harmed or impacted by this in any way whatsoever. And we as a state working with the local communities will do everything possible to ensure that the shooter is swiftly and effectively prosecuted.
The Mansfield Independent School District has canceled after-school activities following the shooting, and it said more information on the upcoming school schedule will be released Wednesday. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
And today, Senate Republicans gathered in D.C. and 10 governors met at the Texas-Mexico border. They expressed their grief over the Texas shooting and then called on the Biden administration to take action at the southern border. NTD's Jason Perry has the story.
The Washington Times reported on Sunday that catch-and-release numbers on the Texas-Mexico border increased more than 430,000% in this August compared to last August. Senator Cruz said that figure is so big that one may think it's a typo.
The last couple of weeks, I did roundtables with farmers and ranchers in South Texas who described the chaos of finding dead bodies on their ranch land day after day after day, who described moms in South Texas who described that they wouldn't let their teenage children go outside unless they carried a loaded firearm because there's so many human traffickers and narcotics traffickers crossing across their properties.
Other senators in D.C. explained the effects of the changes in immigration policies.
when President Biden stopped doing enforcement of catch and release and decided they're going to instead just release people into the country and say, show up for a hearing 2 or 3 years in the future, and we'll check in with you then. When he dramatically changed the policies of how we handled immigration over the past several years, he actually released into the country millions of people.
Now, it's estimated by the end of this year, we will have seen 2.3 million illegal immigrants. 2.3 million. Put that into perspective, folks. There are 10 states in the United States that do not have a population of 2.3 million people.
10 state governors also met at the Texas-Mexico border and called on the Biden administration to take action.
The White House press secretary last week told the Republican governors to be a part of the solution. We've tried to meet with the president and be a part of the solution, but he refuses. Even worse, he ignores. Just like he's ignoring the border and the well-being of the American people. If the president won't meet with us, then we'll share our policy ideas today. Hopefully he'll hear the solutions and act.
Governor Greg Abbott offered some solutions to the Biden administration.
1, the Biden administration must reinstate the Remain in Mexico protocols, which require asylum seekers to remain in Mexico while awaiting their court hearing. This is a proven deterrent to crossing illegally. 2nd, the Biden administration must finish securing the border, which includes, among other things, finishing the border wall. 3rd, the Biden administration must enforce Title 42 health restrictions at the border.
Many governors are concerned about the large increases of fentanyl coming into their states.
Fentanyl overdoses have replaced car accidents as the leading cause of death for people 19 and younger in Pima County, one of our border communities. Pima County deputy sheriffs are responding to a call involving fentanyl every 40 hours.
So in Ohio, at least 80% of our overdose deaths every week are caused by fentanyl. It is being mixed into everything. I get calls, I get letters from family members who have lost someone. So this crisis at the southern border is a humanitarian crisis. It's also a drug crisis. It's a fentanyl crisis.
26 governors have signed a letter asking the Biden administration to take action on the border. We reached out to the Department of Homeland Security for comment, but did not hear back before airtime. Jason Perry, NTD News.
The Arizona Attorney General is accusing the Justice Department of trying to intimidate parents with its directive to target threats against school boards. The AG suggests it could be an effort to advance elements of critical race theory in school curricula.
Arizona Attorney General Mark Brnovich asked U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland Tuesday to rescind his order to direct federal resources to target threats towards school boards. On Monday, Garland directed the FBI and U.S. attorneys to hold meetings with federal, state, and local law enforcement leaders to discuss ways to combat an alleged spike in threats against school administrators, board members, and teachers. The DOJ will also create a task force to help address the issue. The move was applauded by the president of the American Federation of Teachers, who pointed to threats amid the critical race theory furor. The inclusion of elements of quasi-Marxist critical race theory in school curricula has been a particularly contentious issue at school board meetings nationwide. Fox News reports Brnovich told Garland that Arizona parents are rightly concerned and outraged by CRT being introduced upon their kids, and said the vast majority of parents are protesting in accordance with their constitutional rights. He called DOJ's move a shameful attempt to force CRT upon our impressionable children against the will of local communities. Brnovich continued, "Your letter promotes a false narrative that most people who are against CRT are running afoul of our laws, and it further attempts to intimidate such parents from exercising their right to protest school board actions." Other Republicans such as Governor Ron DeSantis and Senator Josh Hawley have accused the DOJ of trying to intimidate parents into silence.
They are feeling worried and intimidated.
Tiffany Justice was a school board member in Florida for 4 years. Around 1 year ago, she co-founded Moms for Liberty, a national parents organization that advocates for parental rights. She says parents are feeling intimidated by the DOJ's directive, but says it's only a temporary state.
I think it was an act of intimidation. It was meant to try to send a message, the criminalization of dissent. This, that if you don't agree with everything that's happening, that somehow you are a problem or a disruptor and that your voice should be silenced rather than heard. And I don't think parents are going to stand for it. So for a moment, we're going to be intimidated, no doubt. But my message to moms and dads across the country is stand tall, be brave, be joyful warriors. Remember to smile. Remember to engage people in positive conversations. Because we really need to start modeling working together, and what better lesson can we show to our children?
Justice noted that 2 out of 3 children don't meet reading proficiency standards. Many kids are also struggling with the negative effects and setbacks of remote learning. Justice says parents and school boards need to unite and put the well-being and education of children first.
The Biden administration is expanding the number of people eligible for student loan forgiveness. Thousands will soon see a reprieve on their educational debts. NTD's Phil Zoe reports.
The Department of Education says it plans to help 500,000 students with their loans by updating a student loan forgiveness program that targets public workers like teachers, nurses, and firefighters.
Definitely, just do it. Relieve us all. We all need education.
It estimates over 20,000 students will have federal loans forgiven right away, totaling almost $2 billion.
I would definitely be for more funding for the public sector. Quite a few of my professors are still paying off their student loans.
The Education Department said frontline workers deserve it because they've been working at the front lines of the pandemic. But economics professor Richard Vedder disagrees.
And it's favoring some student borrowers over others, which is unfair and I think inappropriate.
Vedder says the relief comes at a bad time when the country is already in massive debt itself. Giving away more money may make things worse. We spoke to college senior Alejandra, who owes $10,000 in debt. She supports the student relief, but agrees that the tuition and debt is getting too high.
So it's just kind of in our, sadly in our DNA to being in debt is kind of the way to get ahead, but that's just unfortunate.
Economics professor Casey Mulligan says precisely because of government aid, that tuition keeps going higher.
We subsidize education. That makes more students willing to try to go to school, and that allows the schools, the colleges and universities specifically, to charge more.
Mulligan says when governments take over industries, the outcome is usually disastrous.
Student loans need to go back into the private sector where it's done with good service, done more cheaply, more efficiently.
Earlier this year, the government already canceled around $6 billion in loans for students who have permanent disabilities. Phil Zoe, NTD News.
House Democrats want to charge mining companies operating on federal land for the first time ever. They say it's only fair to make them pay. But some say this new tax could hurt the mining industry in the U.S. and force the nation towards more dependence on Russia and China. NTD's Melina Weiskup has more.
Senators are criticizing a new mining royalty plan by House Democrats, calling it anti-green and pro-China. It would enforce new fees on mining companies, an 8% gross royalty on existing mines and 4% on new ones, and a 7-cent fee for every ton of rock moved. These hard rock minerals like lithium and copper are what's used to make wind turbines and solar panels. So President Biden's green energy plan increases the demand for mining these minerals, while more fees make it harder to do so.
If you make it more expensive to mine in the United States, not only are we currently importing more than 90% of our metals and minerals, that percentage is going to go even higher. That is just seeking to make us completely reliant on China for our energy infrastructure and energy security.
He says China mines approximately 8 times as much product as the United States, and China is the largest mining nation in the world. House Democrats pushing for energy reform say we can avoid dependence on China by developing our own minerals like lithium.
We will develop, manufacture, employ business and workers here in America.
But in the past, environmentalists have blocked any efforts to do so.
The Pebble mine, that would have been a prodigious producer of minerals and metals and crucial materials, and that got shut down. And that happens time after time after time. They say that they want to push for these energy sources that depend upon metals and minerals that must be mined, and then the moment that we do that, they oppose all of it anywhere in the United States. They want us to be totally dependent on China and other nations.
Those who support new royalties for mining on federal lands say that mining companies aren't paying their fair share in taxes. Some in the mining business say they're open to new royalties, but the House proposal goes too far. Senators now aiming to find a middle path.
I would urge us to maybe not take quite the zealous approach that the House of Representatives took, but to find a fair and transparent way for taxpayers to be compensated for these minerals.
And he's echoed by a few other Democratic senators who do acknowledge that this House proposal would impose billions of dollars in new fees for mining companies, potentially hurting the mining industry. So now senators are working through the details, hoping to find a path forward that won't deal such a heavy blow to the mining industry and our energy security. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
On the back of a massive oil spill in California, some are calling for accelerating the move away from traditional energy toward renewables. But with energy crises in Europe and Asia, what's the risk of moving too fast? NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
The pipeline has essentially been pulled like a bowstring, and so at its widest point is 105 feet away from where it was.
After the massive oil spill over the weekend, there have been calls to move toward renewable energy. California's congressional delegation has introduced legislation to ban new oil and gas drilling in U.S. waters on California's coast.
This is about the stale air of normalcy versus the fresh air of progress. Right now, fossil fuel jobs literally are outnumbered 5-1 versus clean energy jobs in the state of California. Outnumbered 5-1 today. This does not have to be part of our future.
NTD spoke with two energy experts to get their opinions. Sterling Burnett is a senior fellow at the Heartland Institute. He says renewable energy still pollutes. It's just a different type of pollution.
The pollution from renewables is created during the manufacturing of the renewables. They take a lot of rare earth minerals that have to be mined and refined.
Burnett also says renewables are unreliable, pointing to California's rolling blackouts every summer.
This is not a matter of is one better than the other. This is a matter of trade-offs. If we're going to go green, the trade-offs are less reliable energy at a way more expensive price point with reliability on foreign countries for that energy.
Daniel Turner is the founder of Power the Future, an organization that shares facts on energy. He is also concerned that renewables are unreliable.
Right now, we have major European leaders whose solution is, let us hope we don't have a cold winter. Right? How is that possible?
Both experts agree that pollution is still an issue with renewables and that nuclear is a good, clean, powerful source of energy. Meanwhile, the California oil cleanup continues. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
There's been a recall for hundreds of thousands of COVID-19 test kits. If you used an Ellume home kit recently, there's a chance your positive test results were false. NTD's Miguel Moreno has the details.
Australian company Ellume is recalling about 427,000 COVID-19 at-home test kits. The test kit maker says they learned their kits were reporting an unusually big number of false positive results. A false positive is what it sounds like. The test says you're positive, but you're not. The FDA also issued an alert. Ellume said this problem was tied to a manufacturing issue, but didn't go into detail.
We've seen the same kind of thing happen with vaccines.
Gerald Comisiong is the CEO of Todos Medical, a medical diagnostics company.
If there are any issues, if someone brings something in from the outside, if some protocol isn't followed, you end up with contamination that can absolutely make tests and other products ineffective.
The Biden administration has signed a $231 million agreement with Ellume. According to the Australian company's website, Ellume is supposed to deliver 100,000 tests per month to the U.S.
And what do you think the U.S. government should do in light of what's happened?
Well, what's clear is that we need more manufacturers in the U.S. of test kits. We need to be self-reliant without having to rely on significant imports. Since the beginning of the pandemic, whether it was masks, whether it was test kits, whether it was pipette tips, we've been relying on outside parties, other countries, to give us our raw materials and sometimes our finished products. And, there was at one point a tepid agreement that the government would really back made in the USA products and build up manufacturing in response to the pandemic. And that really never happened. So I think what the government needs to do is to follow through on their promises of backing the companies that are trying to make things here in America so that we can build up our own product and supply chain.
Ellume has said their contract will support the establishment of their first U.S. manufacturing facility. In an emailed statement, they told us they found the root cause of the manufacturing problem and put in more safeguards to meet their high-quality standards. Ellume tells us approximately 42,000 affected tests have been used and produced positive results, which include both true positives and false positives. The company has set up a system on their website for customers to check if their kit was marked for recall. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Coming up, some lawmakers in New York want to abolish cash bail and keep people out of prison. We hear from a mother who's advocating against such changes to the law after her son was murdered. And fires continue to burn in California's Sequoia National Forest. The forest is home to the iconic giant sequoia trees. Firefighters are rushing to put out the fires and protect the trees. That and more here on NTD News. The drama around the infamous Rikers Island prison in New York City continues. Many want the prison closed and some want to change certain laws. NTD's Arian Pazdar has more from the city's district attorney's office.
More and more tragic stories are coming out of Rikers Island. Most of the inmates on the island are waiting for trial. Now, some lawmakers want to get rid of cash bail in order to keep people out of the prison.
I have never seen anything as brutal and horrific as what is happening on Rikers Island today.
In cash bail now! In cash bail now! New York City already underwent bail reform last year. Cash bail was abolished for many crimes and offenders are let go instead. The argument was that it was unfair that people with money had the resources to stay out of jail. Now officials at Wednesday's event want to take it a step further and abolish cash bail for all crimes, including violent ones. According to a New York City police union, because of bail reform, 9 out of 10 people who are arrested with an illegal firearm are released the next day. And 5 out of 10 who pull the trigger will be released back out onto the street as well. That's why many want to keep the cash bail system.
Our children are being murdered. Our children are being slaughtered in the street by one another. And there are no consequences.
That's Madeline. Her son, an army veteran who served in Afghanistan, was allegedly killed by 4 people. 3 of them are in jail, while 1 was released from Rikers Island because of bail reform.
So she has been free, out on bail, coming and going, home with her family, her children, working in Harlem, like she didn't just participate in the murder of another human being.
Speakers at the event, however, want to put an end to the cash bail system. Arian Pazdar, NTD News, New York.
Fires continue to threaten California's iconic giant sequoia trees. Firefighters are rushing to protect the trees and contain 2 active wildfires burning in the Sequoia National Forest.
Giant sequoia trees are the largest and most hardy species of trees in the world, but they are no match for the devastating wildfires sweeping through the southern end of California's Sierra Nevada mountain range. The Windy Fire started in September and has burned through parts of the Sequoia National Forest, killing dozens of sequoia trees. The fire is currently over 97,000 acres and 75% contained. Another fire burning in the area is the KNP complex. It's a little over 84,000 acres and 11% contained.
The fire, as you can see in this area, burned really intensely. It consumed all the fuels in this area, leaving nothing except for dead standing trees.
Sequoia trees have unusually thick bark that protects them from the elements, but one of the tree's weaknesses is their crown. If fire reaches the upper parts of the tree, it can be fatal. Forest staff are finding new ways of saving the trees, including wrapping the tree bases in foil or using rope.
Right here is the line left behind the smoke jumpers in case they need to get back in the tree. This goes all the way to the top of the tree. And the climbers climbed the line and brought a hose up with them. And there was a hole in the top of the tree where there was smoke and flames that were coming out of that. And they brought the hose all the way to the top, stuck it into that hole, and they were able to put the fire out from the top of it.
Even after the fires have been put out, there is still a risk that the trees may overheat and cook from the inside. In one grove alone, officials put 20,000 gallons of water on the trees every day to try and cool them down.
There are things that we can do to help the sequoias based upon experience that we've seen with these large fires. During the fire itself, we've been able to come in ahead of time and remove fuels from around the large monarchs, and we've been able to set up sprinkler systems where we've made the site wet and made it so that fire wasn't as intense.
Forest staff say these trees are iconic to the state. According to the International Union for Conservation of Nature, giant sequoia trees are an endangered species.
The idea of national parks were born out of giant sequoias and protecting them. It's something that Californians as part of their identity.
According to the National Park Service, giant sequoias can grow over 200 feet tall and live up to 3,400 years.
Coming up, China will be fully capable of invading Taiwan by 2025, according to Taiwan's defense minister. China shows no sign of stepping back, but many Taiwanese residents say they think a war is unlikely. And more about a Chinese Communist Party military base. Their objective is psychological warfare, and their target is the United States. More when we return with NTD News.
Secure, the true solution for your digital privacy and security. Secure is a private and secure messaging and email solution hosted in Switzerland, using military-grade encryption and Swiss privacy laws, giving you true privacy. Secure is 100% private and does not collect or sell any of your personal data. Secure's Helix technology connects you securely to our Swiss servers without the need of a VPN, guaranteeing privacy and security for all your communications. Secure Messenger doesn't require your phone number or any personal data that hackers target. Chat by Invites allows you to chat privately and securely with anyone outside of your secure network without the need for others to download Secure. Secure Send offers you a private and secure way to email anyone outside of Secure. You won't find this level of privacy or security on any other email or instant messaging application. Visit secure.com. Regain and protect your privacy today.
90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
Taiwan's defense minister says China will be fully capable of invading Taiwan by 2025. The comment is made amid the highest military tensions between the two in the past 4 decades, and that's due to Beijing's air incursions. China shows no sign of stepping back, but many of Taiwan's residents say they think a war is unlikely. Here's more.
China could be capable of mounting a full-scale invasion of Taiwan by 2025. That's what Taiwan's defense minister said on Wednesday, days after record numbers of Chinese warplanes flew into Taiwan's air defense zone.
Speaking about invading Taiwan, China does currently possess such capabilities, but we must consider the consequences.
Chu noted that Taiwan doesn't want to provoke Chinese attacks, even in response to Beijing's air incursions, but also said if there is a fight, Taiwan will stand on the front lines.
Following our judgment, the year 2025 is the year they will have more comprehensive capabilities.
Beijing claims the self-governed island as its own territory and blames the U.S. for selling arms to Taiwan. Chinese officials claim the U.S. is making bad choices by helping the island boost defenses. Taiwan residents seem mostly skeptical about possible warfare. One local called Defense Minister Chu's comments unrealistic.
I think it seems a little unrealistic for some so-called war to break out within this time frame. I think there's more that China can do to us, like they can interfere with us economically or mess with Taiwan through other international treaties and use those methods to weaken Taiwan.
But another resident said he's very worried and described Taiwan as a great bargaining chip for fights between the U.S. and China.
The Japanese government is taking action to cope with the Chinese regime's aggression in Asia. The country stayed strictly defensive after World War II, but its leaders may be thinking about updating their strategy to deter Beijing.
On Sunday, a pair of U.S. jets landed on, then launched from the Japanese aircraft carrier GS Izumo. It's a big deal because the Japanese carrier hasn't hosted any fighter jets for over 75 years. The East Asian country's navy was a leading aircraft carrier power during World War II, but since the war, Japan isn't legally allowed to have a military, though it does keep a self-defense force and follows a strictly defensive military strategy. But as the Indo-Pacific region becomes increasingly dangerous due to the Chinese regime's military buildup and activities there, Japanese leaders are rethinking that strategy. Japan recently began talks with the UK to deepen defense relations between the two countries. They have started formal negotiation over the so-called Reciprocal Access Agreement, or RAA. If passed, the deal would smooth out the procedures for joint military operations. The Japanese government is seeking a similar agreement with Australia, which provides for shared military training and operations. Last month, Japan's ground force conducted a nationwide drill for the first time since the Cold War to strengthen its ability to cope with China. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
In France, a report that details the Chinese Communist Party's influence operations, including tactics used against the United States, is receiving media coverage. A former top editor at AFP says the findings are terrifying. NTD's David Vives has the story.
According to numerous reports, the Chinese Communist Party has been engaging in warfare against the US and other Western countries for many years. This includes not only military warfare, but also economic and psychological warfare. One such report was released 2 weeks ago by a French military think tank. Pierre-Antoine Donnet is the former global editor-in-chief of AFP and an expert on China. He says he was shocked and terrified by what he found in the report, especially the Chinese military's involvement in psychological warfare.
The People's Liberation Army, which is the military arm of the Chinese Communist Party, is involved in psychological warfare. The report mentions a 311 military base, or more precisely, Unit 61716, which drives operations such as the so-called public opinion warfare.
The report says the Chinese military creates artificial intelligence algorithms that are able to influence public opinion and push CCP narrative.
The objective is to manipulate, inside and outside of China, people's notions on the CCP. Outside of China, this war primarily targets Taiwan. The U.S. is also targeted, especially politicians and the military.
The report also says the organization of the military base at different levels is monitored by CCP officers or political commissioners. Their role is to orient the action of the chain of command according to CCP objectives and warfare theories. The theories define the narrative of the CCP, and the commissioners monitor their execution.
The commissioners are the ones that hold the true power inside the facility, over the different military sections, R&D, equipment, political bureaus, etc.
According to the report, the CCP employs at least 2 million Chinese people to monitor the narratives on CCP over the internet full-time, plus another 20 million part-time.
This is terrifying. The CCP is trying to create and forge a new world order. Its influence is like an octopus unfurling its tentacles over the globe, trying to spread its sphere of influence and dominate.
And this is only psychological warfare, not to mention the role of CCP agents across the globe or other means of influence. David Dives, NTD News.
Coming up, Dutch and UK gas prices have jumped 60%, and both countries saw a 40% increase within a day. The soaring prices could impact the economy. And TikTok and Snapchat will have to follow new rules in the UK. The regulations include having clear and visible terms and conditions that prohibit content relating to terrorism, child abuse, or racism. Find out more in just a moment here on NTD News. Sweden is halting the use of Moderna's vaccine for people 30 and younger after reports of side effects. The country's health agency says there's an increased risk of heart inflammation, although it says the risk is small. Olivia Chan reports.
The Swedish health agency on Wednesday said the country is suspending the use of Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine for people born in 1991 and later. That announcement came after reports of possible rare side effects among youths and young adults, such as myocarditis, an inflammation of the heart muscle, which the Mayo Clinic says can include symptoms that resemble a heart attack. In a statement, the health agency said the connection is especially clear when it comes to Moderna's vaccine Spikevax, especially after the second dose. It added that the risk of being affected was very small. The health agency now recommended the Comirnaty vaccine from Pfizer-BioNTech instead. Some 81,000 people born in 1991 or later had received a first Moderna shot. They would not be getting a second jab. Earlier this week, the Swedish health agency said people aged 12 to 15 would only get the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. The European Medicines Agency approved the use of Comirnaty in May, while Spikevax was given the nod for children over 12 in July.
Google is planning to use artificial intelligence to time traffic lights more efficiently. It's part of an effort to reduce emissions. Here's NTD's Eileen Eng with more details.
Do you ever feel like traffic lights can do a better job at detecting how many cars are waiting at a long red light? Well, Google may have a solution for that. Google announced on Wednesday it will use AI to optimize signal lights at intersections in an entire city. It's part of an effort to boost efficiency and reduce emissions. The AI will come to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil.
So instead of manually measuring and calculating timings, one of our AI research groups has found a way to accurately calculate the traffic conditions and the timing at most intersections in cities around the world. And then they're training a model on that data to optimize those inefficient intersections.
The tech giant conducted an early phase research at 4 locations in Israel and estimated that the technology reduced fuel use and traffic delays by 10 to 20%. The company says it plans to speak with other cities around the world and test the software in Rio de Janeiro next. Based on early results in Israel, Rio de Janeiro's Municipal Traffic Authority expressed high hopes for the AI to improve traffic signals. According to Reuters, the system should be introduced within months.
Last year, we made one of the boldest commitments yet, to run on carbon-free energy by 2030, every hour of every day. That means every question you ask Google, every Gmail you send, every YouTube video you watch, will be delivered without emitting any carbon into the air.
The announcement is part of a series of updates that will give users the option to be more sustainable. This includes information on carbon emissions for Google flights, the most fuel-efficient route on Google Maps, and energy-intensive home appliances for shopping. Google also announced a new service for Nest thermostats called Nest Renew for people to save more money from home. It can automatically adjust electricity usage to times when energy is cleaner or less expensive. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
In the last 2 days, Dutch and UK natural gas futures have jumped 60%. Soaring prices are fueling the current energy crisis. NTD's Patrick Hayden speaks to an energy expert.
Over the last 48 hours, Dutch and UK gas prices have jumped 60%, and both countries saw a 40% increase within a day. The European Union's energy chief Kadri Simpson said energy regulations could be revised by the end of the year. That's to prevent soaring energy prices from derailing economies. One US-based energy specialist says the European market is too restricted.
Give Europeans more energy choice, that will wean them off their dependence and in an economically efficient and environmentally responsible manner.
Loris says environmental innovation needs to be nurtured from the bottom up.
I think we can have economic and environmental progress, but it doesn't come through these government-forced policies. It comes from making sure that we have a smooth energy transition in which energy affordability and reliability maintains to be a priority while we also make environmental progress.
He says the US is benefiting from other countries' restrictive energy policies as businesses relocate.
I think one thing that we've learned in the United States is that private property rights have been essential in developing the natural gas resources in the United States, where the majority of shale resources fall underneath private property, where the private property owners have the mineral rights and thus the incentive to develop those resources.
Loris says companies are moving to the US and citing the reason as low energy costs, which is due to what he says is a shale gas revolution. Stockpiles of natural gas in the EU are at their lowest levels in more than a decade. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
The UK's communications regulator Ofcom has published new guidance for video sharing platforms. They must take measures to protect under 18s from potentially harmful content and all users from videos likely to incite violence or hatred. NTD's Natalia Nutting has the details.
Ofcom has unveiled new guidelines for video sharing platforms, or VSPs, to keep users safe from harmful videos. The guidance says platforms must provide clear rules around uploading content. They must have clear and visible terms and conditions prohibiting content relating to terrorism, child abuse, or racism. The regulator also says VSPs should have easy reporting and complaint processes. Platforms with pornographic material should have age verification measures. Ofcom says VSPs breaching the guidelines will be fined. In serious cases, the services might be suspended or restricted. High-profile platforms such as TikTok, Snapchat, Twitch, OnlyFans and Vimeo are covered by the new regime. YouTube and Facebook are set to fall under Irish jurisdiction. Ofcom says the long-term aim is for VSPs to get ready for the Online Safety Bill. The bill is set to introduce robust regulation across the tech sector. It will require social media firms and internet companies to sign up to a duty of care to protect users. Natalia Nutting, NTD News.
Just ahead, residents and neighbors in a part of Paris tend to their grape harvest, a 90-year-old tradition in the French capital's only vineyard. And in northern Italy, a new music academy opens its doors to students in Cremona, the birthplace of the violin. A center of stringed instruments, it now awaits musicians from all over the world. Find out more in just a moment here on NTD News.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Thanks to your support, you've helped make MyPillow become one of the fastest growing companies in America. Over the last 12 years, you've helped MyPillow create thousands of jobs right here in the USA.
When I got MyPillow,
I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
That's why I invented My Pillow. My patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs and helps keep your neck supported and aligned. I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled My Pillow, and to thank you for your support, I'm gonna pass the savings directly on to you. For example, you get my 6-piece towel sets, regular $109.99, now only $44.98, or My Pillow dog beds for as low as $19.99 with your promo code.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit mypillow.com.
In a rundown old factory in Belgium, a Holocaust survivor celebrated his upcoming 90th birthday by starring in an opera inspired by his life. A history of love, faith, and forgiveness overcoming the darkest tragedy. NTD's Neil Woodrow brings us the story.
Simon Gronowski, at almost 90 years old, performs in an opera based on his life. In 1943, aged 11 and living in Brussels, Nazis put him, his mother and sister on a train bound for Auschwitz, the infamous death camp in Nazi-occupied Poland.
My message is not a message of sadness, but of hope and happiness.
The train was briefly stopped by 3 Belgian resistance fighters in Boortmeerbeek, 19 miles northeast of Brussels. In the ensuing chaos, Gronowski jumped off. He went on to survive World War II in hiding. His family perished at Auschwitz, where more than 1 million people, mostly Jews, were killed.
During 60 years, I didn't speak about all this tragedy.
British composer Howard Moody was inspired by Gronowski's story, who had told him that his life is but a miracle, and wrote an opera to tell his tale.
He said, "Ma vie n'est qu'un miracle." And having heard the pain of his story, for him to say that seemed a really beautiful thing to say. So I said, "This is an incredible thing to say," and I shook his hand and I said, "I promise to write my next opera on your story." And that's how Push came about.
But there's more to it. Gronowski developed an extraordinary friendship with Konrad Tunnel, the son of Flemish Nazis whose brother had served as the prison guard of Gronowski's family at Auschwitz. This too is covered in the opera.
I am the child of a family of Nazis. I saw all of that, and then I was lucky enough to meet this Jewish boy who escaped that cruelty, and to be able to say to him, "I am pained. You are my brother."
Monsieur, j'ai de la peine. Je vous aime. Vous êtes mon frère.
The opera named Push has been performed several times in Belgium and in the UK. To mark Gronowski's 90th birthday next week, Moody put on a special performance last Sunday in Remenon, a village in Antwerp, Belgium, in which both Gronowski and Tunnel appeared, playing themselves.
It is a message of hope and happiness, and that the life is beautiful.
The performance was staged in an old furniture factory near Boortmeerbeek, where Gronowski jumped off the train nearly 80 years ago. Neil Woodrow, NTD News.
And now to Paris, where amid the hustle and bustle, the crunch of croissants and the whirring of scooters passing by, locals are picking grapes. Neighbors gather together to get the goods stem by stem. NTD's David Vives has the story.
As with any big city, Paris has its large buildings, bright lights, and the sounds of traffic. Montmartre Hill is one of the highest points where one can admire the urban landscape. Just beside the hill, a vineyard spreads across more than 1,500 square meters. 90 years ago, officials were planning to allow high-rise buildings there, but the neighborhood did 2 things French are experts in. They rebelled against the politicians in charge, and they planted vineyards. Eric Sureau leads a neighborhood committee in charge of the vineyard. He wasn't there 90 years ago when it began, but he makes sure the tradition lives on today.
This was once the last green place in Montmartre. After a long dispute between residents and the mayor, we won and planted grapevines here to remind ourselves of times past when Paris were covered in vineyards.
Grape picking begins this week in the vineyard. The activity draws in locals and neighbors who've harvested about 730 kilos from now. Vineyard worker Vincent Bolenor says this year's season is a mixed one.
We have Pinot and Gamay grapes, so it's wine with a pretty good taste, but a light one. We can't compare Montmartre wines with others. We remain unique.
Bearing a good harvest despite the heavy rains and the late frosts that ravaged winemaking areas in much of the country this year. Up to 2,000 bottles are produced each year. Though the wine hasn't as much fame as other red or rose wines, it still makes the neighborhood proud. Besides, according to the district mayor, sales of the wine will benefit charity.
We're also making wine to do some good, so some of our proceeds go to the Child Care Charity Association to help less privileged children and to senior citizens. The sale of this wine, since its creation, benefits social causes.
Lejointe said local leaders plan to apply for UNESCO's World Heritage title. Another way to make sure the Montmartre residents' very own garden will remain as it is. David Vives, NTD News.
A magnet for musicians around the world, the Italian town of Cremona is known as the birthplace of the violin. And now it's home to a new musical academy where students can study with master violinists. Let's take a look.
Cremona in northern Italy boasts a proud history of stringed instrument making. The small town was once home to Antonio Stradivari, the greatest violin maker of all, as well as Andrea Amati, who designed the first violin in the mid-16th century. Despite the passage of time, the instruments are still made in time-honored tradition.
Well, it all started back in the mid-1500s when Andrea Amati produced the first instruments that we know, because he put a label inside the instrument, so that we know he existed, and there also are archival information. But he made the first, what we call true violin.
More than 500 years later, in the very birthplace of violin, a musical academy has been created to promote excellence. On Monday, the Stauffer Center for Strings opened its doors to students, offering opportunities to learn from and play with the world's maestros. The center encourages research and study into the production of violins as well as the music itself.
So after 50 years from the creation of the Stauffer Foundation and 35 years from the creation of the Stauffer Academy, we are about to open the Stauffer Center for Strings, the very first international center entirely dedicated to strings.
The Stauffer Foundation was founded by a Swiss and Italian entrepreneur. A graduate of the foundation, Francesca Dego is now one of Italy's best-known violinists.
This wonderful masterclass for concertmasters, for orchestral leaders, which is of course one of the top jobs in the industry, and very few teachers, very few students actually get to access a course and to meet face-to-face with so many different leaders from the top.
For those hoping to make a career with these instruments, Dego has some advice.
You need the charisma, you need to be a figure the audience wants to listen to. You need to have a voice that is your own, but that also means something to who listens, because if it doesn't, they won't like you, they won't. And it's very cruel in that way, but it's showbiz.
Violins made by Antonio Stradivari, Andrea Amati, and other masters are priceless and are only lent out by foundations. Today, Cremona has more than 140 workshops where artisans of all nationalities design and make musical instruments.
A massive plume of Saharan dust mixed with sulfur from the volcanic eruption in the Canary Islands has shrouded parts of Cuba, turning blue skies into a brown haze. The dust is sparking health warnings as air quality falls to unhealthy levels. Video shows hazy skies over Havana's Malecon coastal strip and the emblematic National Capitol building. Strong warm winds over the Sahara Desert typically whip up sand at this time of year and carry it thousands of miles across the Atlantic Ocean to the Americas. But this year, it's mixed with volcanic ash particles from Spanish island La Palma. That's according to the Cuban Meteorological Center. The dust cloud moved into western Cuba on Tuesday, and authorities recommended people stay indoors to reduce exposure to these particles. And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.